When it comes to modernizing identity, Active Directory just makes everything harder, from managing access for contractors and departing employees to securing cloud apps and on-prem systems. Your company deserves better. Choose Okta, the modern identity platform that securely connects anyone that touches your organization to any technology they want to use. Okta reduces AD vulnerabilities, secures not only employees but contractors and customers, simplifies domain consolidation, and reduces your attack surface. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/Okta. Detecting and responding to threats in the cloud is harder than doing it on-prem. Even when you do have the visibility you need, legacy security workflows weren't designed for the speed and complexity of cloud environments. Cloud-native security solutions from ExtraHop are purpose-built to spot threats across the hybrid attack surface, provide detailed investigation steps, and help you automate response. Request your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome everyone to RSA 2020. This is our first interview. I'm so excited. Mehul Ravankar, did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Awesome. And you're from SaltStack.
Yep.
And what is your role today at SaltStack?
So I'm the director of product for SaltStack, building out all the cybersecurity and enterprise products at SaltStack.
Fantastic. I wanted to just for our audience, I know you've been on the show before, but give everyone a recap of what is SaltStack and then kind of a breakdown of your products.
Sure. So SaltStack is an ID automation and orchestration platform which helps organizations manage and secure their assets across the organizations. And the assets could be in the cloud, in the data center, containers, network devices, and so on. It doesn't really matter to us. And it's, all these assets are within our scope of management. And we do this with our open source project, which is Salt.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Python-based framework, which has had hundreds of thousands of commits, millions of downloads, over 3,000 active users who are committing code and so on.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's our open source platform on which, on top of which we built our own enterprise solution for managing all these assets. So we have our open source platform, which is Python based, and on top of that, we built our enterprise solution to manage these assets. And on these enterprise solutions, we have built add-ons for our cybersecurity use cases. One of them is SaltStack Comply, which allows users to do secure configuration management with industry standard guides such as CIS, DISISTIGs, or even your own custom hardening guides. You can bring that into the product to do assessments and remediation.
So the open source is just called Salt, right?
Just called Salt.
And then when you move into the enterprise product line, there is SaltStack Comply.
The SaltStack Enterprise is the core platform.
Yep. Okay.
And then the SaltStack Comply is the module on top, which sits on top of
the module to do compliance.
Right.
Which is important. We work together in Tenable. We talk a lot about compliance and how, and configuration is really where it's at today. And that's so important because everything is configuration. You know, I was going through when you have to build out a CI/CD pipeline, you need source code version control, you need a Docker registry, you need an orchestration platform, you need a place to host it, you need an orchestra, and all of those are basically configuration, right? So getting control of that is really important. But Salt has taken it a step further, right? SaltStack has taken it a step further and moved to the protection, right? With not just compliance, but also with patching. So how do those come together, right?
Right. So first module is SaltStack Comply, which does the secure configuration management across a wide variety of devices. But then
it doesn't just tell you that your configuration is not secure or not to a certain compliance specification. It allows you to change it.
Right.
Okay.
It allows you to change it with change control workflows configured into the product as well.
Yeah.
And the SaltStack Protect is our vulnerability remediation module, which allows you to not only find vulnerabilities within your assets, but also actively remediate them with SaltStack Protect. So those are the two modules we have built so far in the last 2 years. And in fact, SaltStack Comply is the finalist for the Best Risk and Policy Compliance Solution for SE Awards 2020.
That's
today.
awesome.
The awards are the award
being held this week, right?
Yeah, it's tomorrow. So we're super excited. Fingers crossed. We hope we win.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, we've received really good market traction for the products we have built in a very short period of time, and customers are loving it so far.
And now it doesn't require that an agent be on every system that I'm managing, but I certainly recommend that people use the agent-based approach, correct?
Right. Agent-based has, for a good part of my career, I was on the agentless camp, and I've been once we started using SaltStack or the Salt agent. It's a no-brainer. It's more responsive, more instantaneous, and if things are not compliant or insecure, you can instantly run commands from the Salt remote code execution engine and fix things instantaneously instead of doing a polling operation, which might be once a week or once in 2 weeks and so on.
But what I really love is that I can put, because we still have physical infrastructure. Many people, you're always going to have, I think, some level of on-premise and cloud infrastructure. And we have both, right? And for let's just say the on-premise stuff or cloud, I put one agent on that system. It tells me if there's configuration issues. Those could be out of compliance, or those could be, hey, dummy, you configure something insecurely, right? And they could be that you're missing patches, and the platform allows me to remediate those problems. All with one platform, one agent. That's
across not just operating systems but even network devices.
So you have a vast support. Well, because your open source community, is contributing to some of that support.
We can communicate with, I think, over 24 cloud providers out of the box.
That's awesome. Because it's all configuration.
It's not only that, because we also get a lot of pull requests from the community, and they add support for Linode, right? We don't actively add support for Linode. We definitely support them, and if there are bugs, we'll fix them. We have an open engineering team which is dedicated to making sure our open source platform is robust, scalable, stable, and so on. But we get all these benefits of being an open source company, building an enterprise solution on top of it.
And now some of the new features that you've added, I think, are really awesome, right? Because you can take in vulnerability data from other solutions and apply that to this process that we just talked about of discovering and remediation. Right.
So when we announced or when we launched SaltStack Protect, and usually we spent a long time of our career as a company in the IT ops administration space, right? So we don't get introduced to security companies or the SecOps people right away, right? So IT ops is our gateway into security, and when we come in and we make a proposition, we can also remediate your vulnerabilities. Well, that's the security team's job, and they have their own tools, and we don't have control over them, we don't have budget over them, but if you can bring in their data, that's of value to us, right? So what we did in our last release, we started importing data from vendors like Tenable, right? You can run a scan in Tenable and bring that assessment data into SaltStack Protect. And the way we have built our remediation logic within the product, we can bring in the data from vendors like Tenable, and in future we'll also do vendors like Qualys, Rapid7, and remediate them from SaltStack Protect. So the challenges they used to have before was, security would run a scan. Once they are done with the scan, they'll create a PDF report or an Excel sheet and lob it over to the ops guy. Hey, go figure it out. Go figure out a way to fix it, right? And then the ops guy on the other end, he's probably figuring out manual scripts, writing bash scripts or PowerShell scripts or whatever it is to fix these vulnerabilities. And then, hey, I fixed these vulnerabilities. They go run a scan again. Some of them are not fixed. They come back again, and the process goes over and over again, right? So with this process, what we have done, we have simplified the whole workflow, where you bring in the data, click remediate, and you're done. And it's all integrated with change control workflow. For example, if you want to make sure that only those patches that are approved by the application owner or the system owner.
I love that, because as a systems administrator, right, I know that there's a class of or characteristics or attributes of certain remediation tasks that any sysadmin, right, knows this. Yeah, that's safe, right? This stuff I want to do some more testing.
Right.
But the stuff that's safe could be greater than 50%. And that sounds like it can just be a continuous workflow that goes through SaltStack to just go click remediate, right? And then the other portion might require a little research and testing. Once it's tested, go through the same process. That's awesome.
And then what we see is, if it's a very small company, mid-sized to small companies, they probably don't have ServiceNow. They don't have any ticketing. It's the second.
So ServiceNow determines whether or not it helps you take the action within SaltStack to say, this asset can be auto remediated, this one can't, and it's ServiceNow.
Or somebody can approve it in ServiceNow and send the job to SaltStack Protect, and then we can remediate it from there. But it is not a requirement. You can obviously do it within the platform without having ServiceNow. So if you're a very small company, you don't have ServiceNow in your organization, no problem. You can remediate it. And it's all API-driven solutions. So you can build your APIs around tracking what changed, who changed what, and there is a complete report of what changes we made to the system.
Fantastic. Any other new features that you're working on that you want to give kind of our audience a heads up about?
Yeah, so when we build products here at SaltStack, we take a MVP style approach, the minimum viable product, and the approach we took here was for our first pass at integration, we took a file-based approach for integration. What we would like to do is do a much more tightly knit API level integration with Tenable, so that customers can configure their Tenable scanners within our product, and as soon as the scans are run, you can import them directly without having to do an import or export of the files or anything. And you can pick and choose what you want to bring in. So that's definitely something we're actively looking into, and as we go into future releases of the product, you'll see that taking shape. The other thing we want to do is we want to integrate with other VM vendors as well. So Qualys, Rapid7, all these vendors we're actively pursuing technical partnerships with. And they are also from their perspective, this is a benefit for them as well, because their customers typically don't have a really good patch management workflow in place. I mean, they have a really good, scanning engine in place. They've spread across their scanners across the infrastructure. But when it comes to remediation, what are you doing? You either buy a very crappy solution or you don't do anything at all. So we are trying to bridge that gap. And then, some interesting vendors we are looking into. When you're looking into the VM space, one of the key challenges is the prioritization of these vulnerabilities, right?
Sure.
And vendors like Kenna are, running away in the sense that they're doing a really good job of prioritizing vulnerabilities by taking in data from vendors like Tenable, Qualys, and Rapid7 as well. So we want to integrate with, those, visionary kind of, or innovative companies who are, kind of creating a new category.
Yeah, I agree.
And, bringing in the prioritized data and then doing the remediation with SaltStack. So those are the big picture items. And we also want to look into doing a better job of just scoring the assets and vulnerabilities. I mean, when we, because SaltStack is managing so many assets, it's very natural for our customers to ask us, well, now that you manage our 10,000 assets, can you tell us, differentiate between which asset is important versus not? Because, if somebody has
So you'll be doing some of that prioritization within SaltStack as well, with a deeper kind of knowledge of what's happening in the network.
So one of the things we did at SaltConf last year is we launched our AI project, Umbra, the open source AI project. And we are planning to leverage parts of our AI project to help better classify two things. One is assets itself. Like sometimes, and the classification is very opinionated. It's an opinionated artificial intelligence in the sense that when we look at an asset, we know by just looking at hardware profile. Like if you just look at the hardware profile of some of these assets, some are more beefed up. The production assets, it's more likely that they'll be more beefed up compared to a test or a dev environment, right? So if an asset has more connections going in, maybe it's a web server, maybe it's a database server,
DNS server.
So it's very,
could be critical.
It could be critical. We want to get to a point where we can automatically classify these assets, or maybe the asset is connected to the internet, right? It has a public IP address, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So we've trained our artificial intelligence model with these criteria in mind, and the next time it sees a new asset, it applies this sort of an algorithm and automatically classifies. By the way, based on things that we've seen on this asset, we think this is a higher priority asset. You might want to look at it.
And I love that because it's a lot of work to classify your assets, and having an AI engine help you with that classification is a huge help. It's a lot of manual work, right, to know what things are. So this is great.
Right. And
if people want to learn more, and they're here at RSA, you have a booth, I'm assuming, on the show floor?
We have a booth, I believe it's 3129. It's between the North and South Expo. So, I'll be there pretty much all week. So I'll be giving demos and whatnot. So
if you want to see a demo, it's a great great booth to stop by. And Mehul's awesome. Like I said, we've worked together, and he certainly has the technical aspect down and understands this problem very, very well. And you're building solutions that work in a practical environment, which is why I like this particular type of software.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching. See you next time.
Welcome to Security Weekly. I'm your host, Matt Alderman. We are day 3 at RSAC Conference 2020, still in Broadcast Alley, recording here in Moscone West. Joining me for this interview is Utsav Sanghani. You are Senior Product Manager at Synopsys.
That is correct. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're going to talk enabling developers, right, without kind of slowing down velocity. The way I call it is, security without friction kind of discussion. But first, I was telling you a little story on the side. I had a financial analyst meeting last night, and I always love to surprise analysts with the name Synopsys from a security perspective. Right. Can you just give me a quick overview of kind of the Synopsys portfolio from the Software Integrity Group, I think is what it's called, right?
Sure. Yeah, so a little over half a decade ago, around 6 years ago, we started identifying best-of-breed solutions and very strategically trying to acquire them in the attempt to build out a complete portfolio. And then the end goal was to bring it all together and have it be made available in such a consumable fashion that behind the scenes, these technologies correlate and intermingle with each other. But for the end user, it doesn't really matter which technology they're using. They get coverage for everything that they want to scan as it relates to their application. Right. So as an example, we oftentimes see applications that customer deliver having proprietary code, open source code, some third-party licensed code. And so in theory, you would need different technologies to do that.
Right, you need like 3 or 4 different tools.
Exactly. And so what Synopsys does is it reduces the user overhead and fatigue that goes in trying to decipher results from different tools and bring it all together. And we do this with our most recent introduction of the Polaris Software Integrity Platform that we launched last RSA, actually.
Yeah, and we covered that on the show.
I remember,
before you guys were actually sponsors. Because, like I said, I always love to throw that curveball at the financial analyst because they don't think of Synopsys as a security company. And I tell them every time I meet with them, I'm like, they've built one of the largest application security portfolios that most analysts don't even know about. So it's always fun to throw that curveball around. So by having all these different tools, right, it provides a very interesting proposition, I think, for development teams in that as we think about the concept of DevSecOps, right? How do you integrate security into the CI/CD pipeline? You need kind of checkpoints at various stages of that pipeline, right? Which for most people would be lots of different tools across that pipeline. So let's talk about how Synopsys starts to solve some of those different checkpoints with the portfolio to make it easy for the development teams, right? Kind of remove some of that friction of security.
Right. So our first challenge was to ensure that we have the best tooling and processes made available so that we can provide coverage across the SDLC. And a secondary problem that we're trying to solve now is, let's take the shift left approach of enabling the developer. At the developer level, the developer doesn't care whether it's a static engine or an SCA engine or you're using something else. They have to comply with security policies. They have to make sure that they are checking in code that's secure and it's not introducing any potential security vulnerabilities into their pipeline. And as we do that, the SAST engine, the SCA engine as an example, they're all coming together. And having that interoperate and coexist behind the scenes really helps improve developer productivity. And so I typically try to tell a lot of my customers, and when I'm doing any of these sales engagements, I will tell customers, don't treat it as a security tool. Treat it as a productivity tool. Because at the end of the day, by helping developers ship secure code faster, you're essentially increasing their throughput, and without them realizing, because gone are the days when you would have developers hitting a scan and going and taking a coffee break. That's yesteryears. That was when waterfall was prevalent. Now we're into this whole agile mode where people have go-to-market pressures and they want to be the first to market, and there's immense pressure in development. And then security swoops in and says, you know what? great, but you need to do X, Y, and Z, and that really adds to a lot of overhead for developers. So what Synopsys is striving to do is, at different levels, identify what the pain points are and make sure we make available out-of-the-box tooling that really streamlines that process. As an example, just last week, we announced the CodeSight IDE plugin that integrates our SAST and SCA engines together. So for the most part, we see developers working on applications, being able to consume both results from SAST as well as SCA. So they know that their open source choices and their code that they've written themselves is secure, and they really don't have to go through the process of security vetting it later on in the process and pestering them 6 weeks out or something. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, the IDE is the starting point, right, in the process. And I don't know that most security companies really understand that, is that from a code perspective, the developers in their IDE, they're writing their code. If I can visualize potential security vulnerabilities in the IDE as they're happening, I am now well integrated into the developer's process of, okay, I can fix that right there before it gets to the end of the line, right? Before it gets over to that final DAST scan in production or whatever, right? And so it's an important part that instant feedback to the developers is really important. So it starts with the IDE. Then you talked about the SAST, right? Obviously, as you get ready to check in code, you can scan it statically, validate any other things that maybe the IDE scan didn't catch. You can do a software composition analysis, and it's all these little steps along the way. But I think what's really, really important to enable productivity, right, is all that data has to get integrated back into the developer tools, right? And so it has to come back into what they're looking for because, 5 years ago or so, everybody wanted to be the single pane of glass. And there's still a lot of vendors that think, I'm going to be the single pane of glass. In the development world,
They don't care.
They don't care. They're not going to log into some central system over here. Now, the security guys might, because they want to get visibility into what the developers are doing and use it as a way as kind of checks and balances. But the developer is never going to log into that tool.
And the comparison I make is, let's say you're going to a tier 1 banking corporation in the US trying to open a checking account. You go through the process, you do the paperwork, and then at the end you ask, hey, I'm using an iPhone. Do you have an iOS app? That's the same question developers are going to ask.
Right.
You need security. Do you support a IDE or a set of IDEs that I'm interested in and I'm using? That's the question that Synopsys has been trying to solve this past couple of years, and we've been able to demonstrate both for our SAST engine and SCA engine, combining it all together into one IDE.
Right. Oh, that's great. Now, there's other parts in the process as well, right? I mean, these are all the early stages, part of the builds. As you get later in the process, right, got to go into QA testing, do some regression testing. Then it gets ready to go to production. Where does Synopsys then fill in some of those latter steps in the process?
So that's a great question, Matt. So what we do is, as I mentioned, I talked about SAST and SCA at the pre-commit stage with the IDE. The next stage that we see our customers aligning on is at the repository level, using something like a GitHub, where traditionally we would have senior developers and security architects sort of doing a code review. And what we're now trying to do is automate that process. So you've merged in, you've submitted your pull request. It goes through a Synopsys workflow that helps these team leads and these security architects to verify if those changes are secure. And if it's secure, it automatically approves it, merges it into master. Now, once it's in as part of your master branch, it starts a formal build process on your CI scheduler, your CI system. At the CI level, you can run a variety of tooling that Synopsys provide with our Coverity SAST engine, with Black Duck SCA, with IAST. And then IAST sort of sits very, very conveniently between the build CI integration space and the QA space, because that's where the handoff happens between dev and QA. And so that happens. And then very recently, we announced the acquisition of our DAST engine that goes by the name Tinfoil Security. This is less than a month old. And what we were trying to attempt to do with that is ensure that the end-to-end coverage for any SDLC from an application security toolkit standpoint is complete. And that was the only missing piece in our portfolio. And so with DAST tool coming in, the Tinfoil coming in, it really sort of fits the missing piece in our puzzle and essentially helps our customers leverage different tooling as they see fit for their applications.
Yeah, when Paul and I were at Tenable, we actually did a web app scanner review.
Oh,
Tinfoil was on our top 3. by
Very
the way.
cool.
If we were going to acquire, we ended up going Tenable on a different path at that time, but we did like the Tinfoil product. And I think Tinfoil also has some interesting API security capabilities with it. So it's not a traditional DAST in the way that you think about some of the other DASTs that are out there. It also has some interesting API security components. And as we think about microservices and these architectures, right, there's a lot more API communication. So having that capability at the runtime side also gives you some additional opportunities to protect the APIs.
Absolutely, yeah. So Tinfoil brings to market a very interesting API fuzzer where it actually parses the content of your API calls and figures out, okay, is the content coming in, does it have any malicious content? Do we need to re-verify this? Is there a potential vulnerability lurking around? And then once it identifies that, it automatically kicks off a developer-based workflow. So it pushes the details into a bug tracking system and it goes back into the developer's funnel. So that way we sort of complete. I like to sometimes not say shift left because frankly this is an ongoing activity and just having the different tooling work in conjunction with the right processes that make sense for an organization across different levels in the SDLC. I think that's what makes customers successful and more productive.
Yeah, it's closing the loop.
Exactly.
At various stages, though. And it is left, but it's left all the way to right.
Yes.
Because there are so many steps along that path where, yeah, everybody wants to shift left, but you can't shift 100% left.
That's true.
You start left, you end right, but if you can close the loop in every single one of those steps, and getting that data back into the developer's hands, that doesn't slow down DevOps. And that is the biggest thing security has to learn as we continue to move into this new age is we have to figure out ways to enable developers, not slow them down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, gone are the days when security was the only stakeholder in the organization that was responsible to ensure that the organization did not have any public exploit that may hit them. Now the onus is also on development to make sure that they work hand in hand with security and ensure that any changes, because let's face it, even if hypothetically a company at a given point in time has 10,000 defects, that number is not going to go down drastically. New code is getting built.
Yeah, right.
That number is probably going to go up. So I think we need to address this in such a way that the right tooling and processes are made available so the inflow of defects and vulnerabilities reduces, and over time you have remediation remediation steps and processes set in place. And that's what we tell a lot of our big enterprise customers as well.
That's great. How do you if people want to learn more, where do they go?
What I recommend is we are at RSA. We're located in Moscone South, booth number 1135. Drop by and one of us can give you a quick demo of what we have to offer. We have some really cute swag as well. We have a Baby Yoda T-shirt for all.
I'm a quarter zip guy. I love that quarter zip, by the way. So if you got one in a large, I'll take it any day. I'll wear it proudly. My wife hates the fact that I wear my quarter zips all the time, but I love them. It's my most comfy clothes. And you can also go to securityweekly.com/Synopsys. Visit them at booth 1135. Utsav, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Matt. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you soon.